When I was 10 years old, my mother escaped her third marriage, leaving with a metal plate inside of her skull. A survivor of severe domestic violence, my mother gathered my brother and I to escape the abuse for the final time. David was her third husband, a charming, hard-working, seemingly honest man. As with a lot of abusers, as soon as they were married, things disintegrated quickly. He moved us from our hometown in Louisiana to Pennsylvania, then to Massachusetts and Delaware as a means of isolation. He got rid of my mother's vehicle and took over all the finances and made sure that outside communication was nearly impossible. 6 years later, after multiple attempts at leaving, my mom, my brother, and I landed back in our grandparents' home in Lake Charles, Louisiana. We adjusted to a new reality. My mom was dealing with severe PTSD and schizophrenia as a result of the physical and mental abuse. As her son, I navigated this new illness by interrogating the truthfulness of everything around me. Conversing and loving a parent with schizophrenia started to plant seeds of paranoia within myself. 10 years ago, when I was 20 years old, I decided to start photographing my mother. At first, I would approach timidly and ask if I was okay to photograph her as a way to learn the camera. No other medium offered me the silent language of being present, but looking with active empathy. By photographing my mother directly, I realized I had no way of averting my gaze any longer, and I was able to establish a relationship that wouldn't have existed otherwise. Allowing herself to be vulnerable, allowing me to be vulnerable with her, and the relationship that grew from that. After years of my mom trying different psychiatric medications, the illnesses became overbearing and she started to struggle with addiction. These substances caused heightened hallucinatory reactions, resulting in monthly, sometimes even weekly, involuntary admissions into the psychiatric wings of varying Louisiana hospitals. Many people think that once you escape an abusive situation, the violence ends, but it is pervasive. Chronic violence cycles begin without end. Mental illness, substance abuse, and poverty chase each other in the same circle from the catalyst of physical abuse. Looking back, my initial interest in beginning to photograph my mom was a coincidental survival tactic of a confused child. In most ways, this continues to be true. Whenever I first picked up the camera, I realized its potential to act as a buffer between myself and a reality I was always avoiding. The difference was, the images the camera made were actually visible, where my repression wasn't. It all started from a deeply rooted need for my mother's love. Not only did I want it, I needed to see it to understand it. The first image I remember making of my mother was during a dense, humid day outside of our home. She was wearing a Saints NFL football sweatshirt and a baseball cap that had a bedazzled fleur-de-lis that she got from the Dollar General. She was doing her usual routine of pacing outside in the front yard. I nervously asked her if she would sit under the oak tree in the front yard that we shared with the Johnsons family. Surprisingly, she accepted. She sat on the big roots of the tree, back against the trunk, feet grounded, knees put to her chest. She rested her head at an angle on her knees, and looked so kindly toward the lens that it began to shake. This was the first time I had stopped to look directly into my mother's eyes for longer than a few seconds since the abuse. I began to realize that this was the only way we could ever accept this reality fully, with a camera in between us, looking at each other both ways through the glass.